Good morning. Yesterday evening, we lost a dear friend. He was a shining light for the Lord. He was a founding member of his church, a man of love, a man of faith, and a man of peace. Please keep Spirit of the Light, his friends and families up in prayer as we mourn the loss of a dear friend. He was it was his concept and his idea and God's message that started and birthed this church. Thank you very much. So today, as we carry on with the work of the Lord, we're going to continue our lesson on patriarchs, to the ancestral line of Jesus Christ. As we know, the patriarch is the head of the family for social, economical, and spiritual means. And we've studied Adam, we've studied Noah, and today we're going to start our lesson on Abraham. And next it will be David, and after David, it leads us to our culmination with Jesus Christ, the promise of the covenant. So from Noah to Abraham, there was a long line from Shem, Ephrath, Shelah, Ebnor, Peleg, Reuel, Serug, Nahar, and Terah. Then we're here now with Abraham. His name was originally Abram, exalted father, and later in our lesson, we'll find that God changed his name to Father of Many Nations. We're going to talk a little bit about his sons and his grandchildren because they are significant to the building of the kingdom and God's covenant, but we won't cover them in detail. Our lesson will primarily be extensively studying Abraham and his life and the things that he accomplished. From our last lesson, I began to talk briefly about the Tower of Babel, and it signifies a monumental time in the history of mankind. We started with creation, the entrance of evil into the world through Adam and Eve. And we discussed the destruction of the world through the flood. And then we talked about the Tower of Babel because after the flood, Noah and his family repopulated the earth. And then the people of Babel became, in their arrogance, a symbol of being God, trying to send the tower all the way up to heaven. And desiring to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered, the people decided to build this tower and its top in the heavens. Well, we know the heavens is where God resides. And the goal was to reach the skies and display their greatness. However, God saw their intentions and recognized that unity combined with their pride could lead to even greater arrogance and disobedience. To curb this ambition, God confused their languages, causing people to speak different tongues. Unable to understand one another, they stopped building and scattered across the earth. And the place was called Babel. And we know the word Babel means speaking nonsense, which sounds like the Hebrew word confused, marking the division of the human language. And as we know from our last lesson, people were scattered by descent. So we had Joseph's family going towards Europe. We had Ham in Africa and part of Arabia, and Shem was predominantly in Arabia and Asia. So they scattered. And the triangle on the page is where Noah landed, and the Tower of Babel is the circle, and you can see the city of is very close to it. So the people that moved to didn't scatter very much. And this is where our story begins in So had the Sumerians of the line of Japheth, which was the second son of Noah, and it was a large city. I'm sorry, he was the third son. And the southern Mesopotamia, located in the Euphrates River near the Persian Gulf. They developed a sexagestional system, which is the base 60 for the clock, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. They came up with that, and we're still using that method of measuring time. And they also came up with the concept of measuring angles, which are still used today. The earliest Semitic text in Mesopotamia comes from Ur. Abraham was part of the large Semitic minority that lived there in Ur, and according to the table of the nations in Genesis 10, the descendants of Shem, including Abraham, occupied the area at that time. So Ur was this amazing city, and it was the place to be at the time. It was renowned for its monumental religious architecture, notably its Tower of Ziggurat, just dedicated to the moon god, which meant it was non-Christian. This structure wasn't just an impressive piece of engineering, it was the focal point of public worship and a symbol of the city's power. It had advanced infrastructure. The city had well-planned streets, multiple storied homes built of baked mud brick, and an intricate system of canals for irrigation and flood control. Such infrastructure supported a dense population and a flourishing economy based on architecture, agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. The city had running water, a sewer system, paved roads, and temples. It also had canals that connected to the Tigris and Euphrates River to control flooding and irrigated farmland. So this was a magnificent place, and you can imagine during that time most of the world was desolate. Here is a major city that Abraham and his family lived in after the separation and the scattering of mankind. So why would anyone leave? Well, we don't really know because the Bible doesn't say, but it does tell us this. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, who had passed away at that time, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abraham, or Abram, as we know he's known at this point. And together they set out from Ur, the place we just talked about of the Chaldeans, to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. That wasn't where God wanted Abram. So God told Abram to leave the land of Haran. Covenant, he said, in his covenant, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you, Abraham. And that's a wonderful promise, but it's not a comfortable one because Ur again was the place to be. And now he's in Haran, which is a little worse, but now he's saying going out in the wilderness. And we'll see what Abram does next. I want to show you the chart briefly. So we have Abraham. He had a brother Nahor and a brother named Haran, which is not linked to the location that they went to Haran, but that is his brother's name as well. And he had a son, Lot. Now, Lot plays a role in Abraham's story as well as his children and his grandchildren, Moab and Ammon. We have Sarah and Abraham, other two wives that we will also talk about in the story, but the blessing of God came through Sarah and her son Isaac. Back to our story. So Abram left his friends behind, and on faith, he took his wealth, his wife, and his nephew, traveled to the land of Canaan. Abraham traveled through this land as far as Shechem. Now, the name Canaan should sound familiar to you because in our lesson on Noah, we learned that the curse of Ham was not directly to him, but his son Canaan. And this is the land of this young man who was cursed because of his father's behavior and mistreatment and disrespect of his father Noah. So now God is telling the son who received the blessings, descendant Shem, to go to the land that he wants for him that belongs to the cursed son, grandson, Canaan. Abraham traveled through the land as far as Shechem, which will be key in a moment in our story. And at the time of the Canaanites were in the land, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. That there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So here's the map. He started at Ur and noticed the green belt. And this is how Abraham traveled, because back then water is more essential than food in the desert, because it was not everywhere was sparing. So there's Haran, where his father Terah and everyone went, and God told him to leave his family and go here. Ooh, that's quite a journey. 1,600 kilometers, which is 1,025 miles. So that's a lot of faith. And he's traveling into a land unknown by God. God didn't know them, and they didn't know him spiritually, but God knew who they were, and he did not like what he saw. So one might ask, why did God take Abraham to so many different locations? Why not select one, place him there, and let him settle down? Well, he was showing Abraham the lay of the land. He knew all of it would be his someday, whether Abraham did or not. And when God sends us out into the wilderness, we should faithfully follow him. He is showing us the lay of the land. It's going to be ours. We need to know about it. It could be for future land stewardship. It could be for leadership, ministry, whatever God's planning on giving you. He's not going to put you in a position to fail. He was setting Abraham up to succeed. And as we look through this story, seek and see opportunities of where God and his infinite insight and Abraham's faith made all of this possible. If God promises something and gives orders, believe and obey him. Be patient. He is going to deliver on his promise. Something powerful and marvelous is going to happen. And we will find in this story, because Sarai was not patient, Abraham's first son did not come from her, it came from her slave, and that created problems throughout time. And it was all because of Sarai's impatience. So be patient, no matter how long it takes. If God promises it to you, it's yours. Abraham gained knowledge of the land and its people. All the while he's traveling, he's learning who these people are. And he's gaining influence and respect long before he took custody and ownership. He went to Egypt and Canaan, and they knew God through him, and they respected God through Abraham and what God was doing. There are no godly cities mentioned in this story, so we can only assume that they all were pagan cities. If Abraham had not been faithful, none of his accomplishments would have occurred, and Jesus would not have been born of his bloodline. His blessings and our blessings start and end with faith. As we explore the story of Abraham, see the miraculous foresight and insight of God. So back to our story. So a famine hits the land, and Abraham and Sarai, or Abram, traveled to Egypt to live for a while. There's the Nile River, and there's plenty of food and water. He portrayed his wife as his sister for protection. Abram was feared. He feared that the Egyptians would kill him to take his beautiful wife. To protect himself, as he asked Sarai to say she was his sister instead of his wife. This was a half truth since Sarai was Abraham's half sister, and we'll read about that in Genesis chapter 20th, verse 12. But it was meant to mislead. God sent plagues upon Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai. Pharaoh realized something was wrong and confronted Abraham. Why didn't you say she was my sister? Why did you say she is my sister? So then I took her as my wife. Then, now then, hear this. Here is your wife. Take her and go. So Pharaoh returned Sarai to Abram and commanded that they leave Egypt. But he left Egypt a very wealthy man because he had some wealth, but in order to marry or have Sarai, he gave Abraham a substantial amount of gold, livestock, jewelry. He made him wealthier for the sale of his sister slash wife. And he sent guards with them for protection all the way home to make sure that their wealth that he accumulated was preserved. So now the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, he knows who Abraham is. He knows who his God is. He's respecting Abraham. And now Abraham has more wealth and even more influence over the land. Even though Abraham faltered and he was deceptive, God used that deception to further on his plan. As we've said many lessons, God's not looking for perfect people, he's looking for the faithful heart, which Abram had. So Abram went up from Egypt after the famine and he went to Negev, and his wife and everything he had and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and silver and gold, as I said. And from Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been before, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord again. And as you see from the note below, Ai becomes more prominent in the book of Joshua. If you want to learn more about it, read his story, where it is depicted as a Canaanite city that the Israelites battle and eventually destroy. So later on, when the time of Moses, this place will become key. And so will the altar that was built by Abraham. So here's the map. He was in Egypt. Now he's back to Canaan, in Bethel, the place he started. So Lot was prosperous, Abram was prosperous, and after the famine, they returned to Canaan, and they had to separate because there just was not enough room for the two of them and their prosperity to pasture in the same area. So Lot took the best of the land for himself, the Jordan plains near Sodom, Gomorrah, and both cities were wicked. Abraham told Lot, if you want to go right, I'll go left. If you want to go left, I'll go right. Pick whatever you want, and I'll take the opposite. And he picked the fresh lands of the Jordan plains. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, basically, don't worry about it. Look around from where you are to the north and the south, to the east and the west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abraham went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tent. There he built an altar to the Lord. Another one. And so here's kind of the location. You can see Lot's closer to the Jordan River. He has the better of the two, but Abraham's not worried about it because he has faith in the Lord.